So to start out, if you've got a device or some sort of media to write with, if you want a PDF of this presentation that I'm providing, that's the URL for it. It may show up again later. And as I've been told, this video is going to be accessible with transcripts online. So to start framing the question, OER, this is a survey of chief information officers of universities from a couple years ago. And if you focus on those bottom 2 points, on the left-hand side, the green bar, I think I'm colorblind, green bar and red bar.
Yes.
OER course materials and textbooks will be an important source of instructional resources. 81% of CIOs say yeah. But what is that next one down? 38% of faculty agree that the quality of the OER matches the available the commercial products. So this is sort of framing where I come from when I'm talking about instructional resources, is creating or upgrading or enhancing, as we just heard in both cases from our previous speakers, about customizing open educational resources for us. So my goals then as a teacher in the classroom are to create for my students authentic resources to help them build information literacy skills, Vera, and talking about assessing the quality of references and of sources of data particularly, and then likewise digital literacy and collaboration skills. My goals today, though, as a professional developer, are just to show you a few examples of how I use OER in my classroom and a little bit of evidence about the value of OER to students. And the goal really is to encourage you to create. So I'm not necessarily advocating, I do advocate for adopting, but my specific focus is on creation or remixing. That's my creds. We can skip past that. I'm a Discovery faculty fellow, as in the first cohort, which is why I've also got a tablet up here with me. I'm recording as we're recording. I'm recording twice for different purposes. And if you want to contact me at all afterwards, I have to run and actually teach the course I'm going to tell you about at 1 o'clock. So I'm going to skip pretty quickly through this. So this is an example of one of my classes. This is Biology 102, Genetics, an upper division major class. And it's all about teaching students concepts and approaches in genetics. So not just material, but how to interact with material, do analyses, and read primary literature in research. So this is an upper division required course. The enrollment varies. It's a medium to largish sized class with 3 hours a week of lecture, no laboratory component. So I'm in class in front of these students 3 hours a week. And so I try to infuse in these classes a little bit of time for them to do things, not just listen to me talk, like you're doing right now, unfortunately. Time is short. So this is the structure of my class in general, and it starts on the top. You see on the left side it says Socrative. So every time my students come into class, I have a quick Socrative survey. This is just a tool I use to collect formative information from them. You've come to class, you tried this question I posed at the end of the previous class. So have you been able to answer it? What questions do you have? We spend a little bit of time at the start of class working on that. Then we get into the asterisks, which is where open educational resources in my class fit in. Right after that, I use Explain Everything, which is that first asterisk right underneath 0 minutes. The in class on the top side. Explain Everything is the app that I'm using to record this right now. And I use this, I record all of my lectures. Not visually like we're doing with the computer on Zoom, but the students see what's being presented on the screen or on my tablet and how I interact with it. So any notes that anybody takes on this tablet get recorded as part of a video along with audio. And then I publish that. So every class, after class, I upload the video of class to YouTube for students to use. That's one type of open educational resource that I create. It's pretty straightforward to do. After that, so after I start recording, the bulk of the class is that top part where it's pretty yellow at the top of that circle, PDFs and Google Classroom. That's where we'll get into using open access PDFs, primary literature, but ones that I've taken the time to make sure are available to everybody, not necessarily accessible, but available for free. No one's going to hit a paywall trying to go to that journal and try to access those documents that we're going to read and talk about in class. And I'll push exercises that I've created, usually in Google Sheets or Google Docs, through Google Classroom, which is that other green icon with the 3 generic heads on it, to students. After that, we do a round of question and answer. We usually end with a Socrative survey again at the end of class. We're on the right side of the screen now. That's the in-class period. And then outside of class, we do more Google Docs. That's the Google Docs in the bottom right with the asterisk. Having students collaborate with each other to do writing or reflection, or what I love to do sometimes is have small groups of students create what I call the perfect set of class notes. So they'll collaborate together in groups of 2 or 3 to try to summarize as best the group of them can what happened in class that day, just as a study tool. We can do Zoom out of class office hours, which is not necessarily open unless I record it, which I often do, as again we're doing now with Zoom for this presentation. I can do that for students. So if they weren't able to come to office hours, I can have an office hour with a student digitally, and then I can record that with their permission and captioning, and post that for students to use as well, and potentially in future for when I create open educational resources for my class. All these videos go onto YouTube, captioned, and then I also, that bottom left-hand corner, the book with the 3 blue hands on it, hopefully everybody recognizes that logo a little bit, Open Educational Resources, OpenStax textbooks. So I require my students, assign my students, I can't require them, I assign my students to read a few chapters of OpenStax textbooks before coming to class. And then we start the next cycle of class. So I use open educational resources in multiple ways. I create videos, and then I also use OpenStax textbooks. The reason that I do OER creation is because the OpenStax textbooks aren't perfect, as Mario mentioned. There's always room to tailor to your specific students, to your specific teaching style, to the content you really want to cover, and sometimes the exam questions aren't exactly asked in the way you would ask them, or you'd like to tweak them a little bit. So that's what got me off creating OER, was there was no genetics OpenStax textbook. There's a general biology one, there's a one that's just called biology that's broader than general biology. I'm not sure how that works. And so I wanted to create more resources for my students, and I'm just going to touch very briefly on the first 3 types: videos, custom course manual, and if there's time, which there probably won't be, Google Classroom. I've already mentioned the bottom 2 points there: OpenStax textbooks and primary literature. So take a picture of the screen, or click on a bunch of links quickly, or we have to move on. Sorry, there's no much time. So half a minute, maybe a minute. What's been good about this presentation for me, not from the others can have their own feedback if they want. What have you liked and not liked about what I've done so far? Presentation-wise, not the content. Your teachers. Hopefully I did some things that were good and some things that were bad. Brian.
I love your presentation presence, your work in the room, which is always good. And the one critique would be, I wish I had like 10 more seconds on the first slide so I could have gotten the presentation and been going through it with you.
Yes, okay. So it's all about making resources available, not just open and free, but distributing. And that slide in particular has way too much information, way too many links. And if you had the PDF with you right now, you could click on those links now and follow along with what I'm about to show you. Or at home, you could spend your time at your leisure, which is kind of what I expect my students to do, go through those movies. So these are all resources that are not going to be presented in full here, but these are the top 5 links are links to my videos, 5 different types of videos that I use. I'm going to really shoot quickly through those types of videos that you might find useful for your classes. And the bottom one is a link to one chapter from my course manual that I've created. And in case I don't get there, the purpose of that course manual is to fix the main problem of getting all of these different types of open access, open educational materials in the hands of students in a way that's clean, that's neat, that doesn't require students to keep track of multiple different emails, Canvas notifications at once. I basically started using this course manual that I created just to collect all that information into one PDF. I could send them at the start of the semester and say, here's everything you're going to need link-wise. Resources, publications, websites, movie links, it's all there. So in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to try to close, maybe 3 minutes. We do all have access to this technology. Here in the library, if you want to make lecture videos, short ones, students don't like them longer than 5 minutes. If you want to make short lecture videos that you ask students to watch before coming to class, Lightboard movies are fantastic. So you stand behind a piece of glass, the recording camera is pointing towards you, you write on the piece of glass. So it's kind of lecturing, but it's a little bit more dynamic. It's not quite like watching an animation. They actually see your face. You can explain subjects if you need to write on the board, draw figures on the board, something like that. You can even have, as was the case here, that engagement, student technology engagement paradigm thing was projected. The gentleman who runs this, Eric West, is a wizard. That's projected onto the screen, so I don't have to, if I wanted to show a map, for example, I wouldn't have to freehand a map. I could have a map projected on the screen, and then I could draw on it. So this is a really fantastic and really engaging type of video. I ask my students to watch these, a few of them usually before coming to class. They're all captioned. Screen capture tutorials, this is a quick one. When I want to have students use Excel or Google Sheets, for example, and they don't know how to use them, I can use, in my case, QuickTime and Apple's Clips app. Happy to go through details one-on-one in person later if you're interested, to create sort of walkthrough tutorials of how to use this computer program, how to navigate this website, how to use this particular database of literature, for example. Those are also things that I ask students to watch ahead of class. One of my favorite things is class trailers. To get students an idea of what they're going to see before they come to class, I have these little 30-second, it's kind of like a video trailer, a movie trailer you'd watch that tries to entice you to go see the movie. Do that for your class. So I usually frame them around a single question that we're going to, and I say at the end of the clip, you feel free to click on the link and watch it at your leisure. At the end of the video, it'll say something like, come to class this time because we're going to find out the answer to this really interesting question in genetics. Also captioned. If you're familiar with jigsaw activities, I have students do jigsaws with short videos where each member of a team becomes an expert by watching a short video on a different topic. They can do this in class if they all have devices. And then they remix the groups so that an expert from each of the original groups is there together and they teach each other what they learned. It's just using videos instead of having them read different materials and then do exactly the same sort of approach. And since I have the opportunity to record basically anything that I would want to write on a screen, I also not only capture lectures using this technology, Explain Everything. You can do this with other apps as well. You can also lecture capture office hours, and I love exam keys. Or if I was a writing professor, which I know, for example, Mary Paul, one of our instructors, who's a close friend of mine, loves to do audio annotations instead of writing written comments to students on writing essays, writing assignments. She'll give voice feedback instead. So those sorts of tools are really useful, but this is another way to create open educational resources. As I'm filling out, because I'm a scientist, a lot of my exams have choices where you have to do an equation or a calculation to come up with an answer or show something, label something. So I used to write static exam keys. I'd print out the exam, I'd write all the answers down on the exam key, I'd scan it, and I'd send it to everybody as a PDF. And they'd have the answers to the exam questions. And then they'd look at the exam, and they say, well, that's the answer, and that's the answer I gave. But they don't match up. How did Professor Ross get to that answer? So I figured, well, since I can record stuff, and since my audio can be recorded while I'm writing on PDFs on a tablet or a smartphone, I can actually talk about how I'm solving a problem while I'm going through solving the problem and writing the answer out. So it becomes a bit more of a dynamic tool that students do, in my case anyway, like to use to learn how a way to get feedback. It's not just a static answer, here's the right answer, how did you get there? I can talk about how I'm getting there as I'm solving the problem. For what it's worth. So there's a quick summary of several different ways to use video to engage with OER. Remember, whatever you do, if it's video, you may run afoul of a couple things you do have to caption if you want to assign it to a class. And the other thing to keep in mind is getting permission to record before you record. I know President Castro sent out an email at the start of the semester that included many things about freedom of speech, but included way at the bottom, if you still have that email, it talked a bit about California laws governing recording and getting the consent of everybody in class to be recorded. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're considering this. So I'll close, again, because I've got to go teach now, with just a little bit of, 2 slides maybe, of data. So when I've used these open educational resources, I poll students, and yes, I got Institutional Review Board permission to collect data from students and share it with you. How much did each of the following contribute to your success in the class? The blue and the, is that yellow on the bottom left-ish of that big pie chart, blue and yellow? A lot and essential. How much did each of the following contribute? In-class exercises, that is working together in class, solving problems, it was really important. But then if you look at watching recorded lectures and using the course manual, those pieces of the pie, the essential and the a lot, are also pretty major components of that. So the students really like having instructor-created, or at least instructor-modified materials that are specific to the class, and they use those materials a lot. And finally, from this semester, brand new data, I asked my students, how do you usually prepare for class this term? And the column on the left there, watch Lightboard, those are the videos that I record in advance using the technology that's downstairs in the library to create videos I ask them to watch before class. Most of the students, well, at least a majority, use those. Compared to watching lecture capture, the 4th column, reading open textbooks is down to like 35%. So they like the instructor-created materials better than, here's the generic textbook that I'm asking you to read some chapters of. Now, it's not to say that it's easy to create OER. I'm going to stop there. But there are lots of ways to get into it. And actually, I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to flip through these. This is examples of the course manual I created. Here's an example slide that quick shows the sorts of the content. It's basically links. It's links to videos. It's links to primary literature, the case study literature. It's links to extension materials, maybe non-peer-reviewed materials that are newspaper articles or something that are relevant to the topic. And what I'm really trying to get to is that, and I'll stop there. So I did not do this all at once, of course. This is a ton of work. And it started when I was hired creating exercise, and it's only been in the last year, really, that I've had the time to finish making all these movies and to start thinking about putting them all together in an open access course manual. And so when I turn in materials to the library, I just say it's all, you don't get anything. I'm not requiring anything. In fact, this semester, for the first time, I saw the come to class or go to class option. There's a button in the drop-down, there's a button, radio button or drop-down list of different things you want the students to do. Just say, come to class, and I'll tell you about what the materials are. That doesn't help for you just have to label it as a zero-cost materials course so that the the bookstore can advertise it as such. But then you can publish whatever materials you have. You just have to watch that concern about they also have to be accessible. And so one of the things to keep watching for in the near future, Brian, I hope this is okay for me to say, is that we do have low-cost Adobe Creative Cloud, and that's what I use to create the manual Adobe InDesign. And there will be some upcoming training opportunities if you're interested in learning how to use those tools.